The cabin was quiet until her voice split it in half. "You don't belong here." The words came from a flight attendant with sharp eyes and sharper tone. She wasn't whispering. She wasn't asking. She was cutting. One hand pointed straight at the man in seat 2 Ampere, the other fisted at her side like the seat itself was a crime. Marcus Carter didn't move. Black t-shirt, clean jeans, no watch, no flash. Just calm eyes that had seen this script too many times before. Around him, the air thickened. First class was no longer hushed and plush. It was a stage, and every passenger was watching. Behind her, the captain folded his arms. His uniform was pressed like a verdict. He didn't speak, but the weight of his silence said enough. The crew was united. A wall of authority against one man dressed too plain for the price of his seat. "Sir," she pressed, voice louder now, "you need to leave." Someone in row 3 gasped. Someone else pulled out a phone, the lens catching the tension as if it were evidence. A blonde passenger to Marcus's right froze, phone already in her hand, her thumb hovering over record. Her expression said everything her lips didn't. This is wrong. But Marcus stayed still, anchored. No outburst, no protest. His only answer was presence unshakable, deliberate. The attendant leaned closer, words sharper with every breath. "First class is for our premium guests. You're in the wrong place." "Oh." He lifted his boarding pass. A valid seat, paid in full. She didn't even look. With a flick of her wrist, she tore it in half. Paper split like dignity on trial. Gasps scattered through the cabin. From the aisle, a second attendant snickered low. "Yeah, economy's more your style. The jab wasn't about seats, it was about image. Jeans, sneakers, skin." A verdict passed without evidence. The captain finally stepped forward. "Comply, or you'll be removed." His voice was steel. Not negotiation, not curiosity, just threat disguised as protocol. Marcus inhaled once. Slow, calm, unbroken. And in that stillness, the whole cabin tilted. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably, unsure which way to look. Others leaned in, phones raised higher, whispering, "Record this." The line between witness and accomplice was drawn in the glow of a camera screen. He glanced toward the captain, then back at the attendant who'd ripped his ticket. His voice, when it came, was steady. "Check again." 3 words. Low, but they shook louder than her entire tirade. Because Marcus Carter wasn't a man caught out of place. He was a man waiting for the storm he knew would come. And before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus. The storm had only just begun. The torn boarding pass still fluttered on the floor like a verdict. Marcus didn't bend to pick it up. He sat steady, his hands resting on his knees, the quietest man in the loudest row. That silence, it unsettled the crew more than any outburst could have. The attendant leaned in closer, jaw tight. "Listen carefully. You're either moving to economy, or you're getting off this plane." A murmur rippled through the cabin. A man in row 4 whispered to his seatmate, "Did he just pay for first class and get tossed?" His seatmate whispered back, "Doesn't matter, they already decided he doesn't belong." Behind them, the captain shifted his stance. His voice entered the aisle like a gavel. "Sir, comply. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Arms crossed, face locked. He looked less like a pilot and more like a judge presiding over a trial that had already reached a verdict. Marcus raised his ID, calm. "This says seat 2 Ampere. My name's right there. Scan it again." The second attendant smirked. "We've seen this trick before. Fake cards, fake tickets. You people always try." That phrase hung in the air like smoke. You people. Phones lifted higher now. A woman in the 3rd row pressed record, her eyes flicking between Marcus and the crew like she was archiving history. Another passenger whispered, "This is discrimination. Not loud, but enough for the cabin to hear." The first attendant's voice sharpened. "Security's already on the way." She tapped her earpiece, nodding to someone unseen. "They'll escort you off before we push back." Marcus exhaled slowly, a breath that carried decades of repetition, because this wasn't the first time. He remembered Atlanta, 25 years old, a new MBA graduate, traveling in a cheap suit bought on credit. He'd saved 3 months for that ticket. At the gate, an agent told him the system had misread his reservation. They bumped him down to economy while a platinum-tagged businessman slid into his seat. Marcus had swallowed his anger, boarded quietly, and told himself he'd never forget the look on their faces when they decided he didn't fit first class. And now, 20 years later, it was happening again. Different faces. Same energy. The torn ticket still lay by his feet, a reminder that respect was always treated as negotiable. The blonde passenger beside him finally spoke, voice shaking but firm. "I saw his ticket. It scanned green. He belongs here." The captain turned sharply. "Stay out of this." But she didn't lower her gaze. She raised her phone higher instead. Around them, murmurs rose, the cabin's temperature shifting from quiet compliance to uneasy witness. Marcus didn't move, didn't blink. His voice was low, steady. "You're making a mistake." And for the first time, the crew hesitated. The hum of the cabin wasn't peaceful anymore. It buzzed like static, restless, heavy with judgment. Row 3. A young man with a shaved fade leaned forward, phone high, camera already red. "I'm filming this," he muttered to the woman beside him. "People need to see." "Put that down," the second attendant barked, voice sharp like snapping metal. "Recording crew procedures is prohibited." But the phone didn't lower. It steadied. The passenger's eyes hardened. "So is tearing up a paid ticket." Murmurs grew louder. A ripple turned into a current. Passengers were no longer just observers, they were jurors, weighing every word. The captain stepped forward, iron in his voice. "Sir, stand up and leave now." Marcus didn't move. His calm was louder than their commands. He simply folded his hands together, eyes steady on the uniform in front of him. "Not until you do your job right." The blonde passenger to his right whispered to the nearest phone lens. "This isn't about policy. Look at him. He hasn't raised his voice once." A woman in row 5 gasped. "They're trying to erase him." Erase. The word struck like lightning. It wasn't about a seat anymore. It was about presence who gets to exist in first class, who gets dismissed as a fraud. The first attendant sneered, her voice dripping contempt. "He's stalling. Typical." Typical. Another word thrown like a stone. And Marcus finally spoke, not loud, not sharp, but with a weight that hushed the rows nearest to him. "Every insult you've thrown doesn't describe me. It describes you." The phone lenses zoomed closer. That sentence carried more power than a shout. It was the kind of line that spreads. Viral before takeoff. The captain's jaw tightened. He turned to his crew. "Call security. We're not debating this." The second attendant nodded and tapped her tablet, fingers quick. "Already did." Gasps again. A low chorus of disbelief swept the cabin. The young man filming whispered to himself, "Unreal." They'd rather call cops than check his name. Marcus sat back, shoulders square, unshaken. He had seen this script at banks, hotels, boardrooms. Now here, at 30,000 feet still on the ground, flashback stirred. Age 29. He had flown to Los Angeles for an interview with a major airline. They'd looked at his resume, then at his skin, then said, "Not the image we're looking for." Those words carved into him like scars. He carried them through every contract, every deal, every acquisition until he bought a quarter of the very airline that once refused him. And now, 2 decades later, he was living that line again, spoken not as policy, but as prejudice. Phones dotted the aisle like candles in a vigil. Witnesses weren't silent anymore, they were rising. Marcus glanced at the young man with the camera. His voice, steady but firm. "Don't just film, speak. Say what you see, M." The young man swallowed, then lifted his voice. "He's done nothing wrong. He paid for his seat. You tore up his ticket." The cabin shifted, a verdict forming. The storm wasn't over. It was gathering. The torn ticket wasn't enough. They wanted humiliation. The first attendant crossed her arms, voice pitched higher for the whole cabin to hear. "You're not a premium guest. You're a problem, a fraud." The second attendant added fuel, sneering. "Not in those jeans, honey. Not in this lifetime." Laughter flickered from somewhere in row 2, nervous but cruel. A few passengers shifted, unsure if they should laugh along or shrink back in shame. Marcus didn't flinch. His silence stretched, long enough for the insult to echo against the cabin walls. Then the captain raised his voice, firm like steel. "This is your final warning. Stand up or you'll be forcibly removed." Phones tilted higher, recording every syllable. The red glow of cameras dotted the cabin like warning lights. From row 5, a mother whispered to her teenage son, "Watch closely. This is how they treat people who don't fit their image." The boy stared, wide-eyed, and whispered back, "But he's done nothing." The attendant's hand shot forward, snatching Marcus's ID from the tray table. She held it up like evidence in a courtroom, then scoffed. "Fake. We've seen better counterfeits." With a snap, she tossed it back down. Gasps broke out across the rows. A passenger near the window muttered, "That's a crime." The second attendant leaned closer, smirk curling. "Go back where you came from. You don't belong in this cabin." That sentence hit harder than the torn ticket. It wasn't about seats. It was about erasure. The young man filming raised his voice now, no longer a whisper. "He belongs here. His ticket was valid. We all saw it." The blonde passenger at Marcus's side added, trembling but resolute, "You can't just call him a fraud because of what he's wearing." The crew ignored them both. The captain barked, "Security will be boarding in 2 minutes. This ends now." Marcus exhaled once, slow, deliberate. His eyes drifted across the cabin, faces tense, phones glowing, whispers colliding. He let the silence hold a beat longer than anyone expected. And then, finally, he spoke. Calm, controlled, heavy with a truth they couldn't erase. "You've called me a fraud. You've torn my ticket. You've humiliated me in front of witnesses. And yet," he leaned forward slightly, voice steady as stone, "I'm still here." The words landed like a strike. The room shifted. Passengers exchanged looks, shame, anger, recognition. The crew froze for just a second, unsettled by the absence of fear in his voice. The blonde passenger whispered almost reverently, "He's not moving. He's not giving them what they want." Marcus turned his gaze to the young man with the phone. "Keep filming," he said evenly. "But remember, it's not just about views. It's about proof." The camera steadied. The air thickened. The storm had reached its edge, and Marcus hadn't even begun to fight back. The aisle had turned into a stage, and the audience was no longer quiet. The young man with the phone shifted in his seat, pulse quick, voice louder now. Everyone saw it. He had a valid ticket. They ripped it up. The blonde woman beside Marcus lifted her chin, eyes locked on the captain. "I saw it too. It scanned green. He belongs in this seat." The captain didn't flinch. His jaw tightened. "Ma'am, sit back down. You're interfering with crew operations." But her phone was already raised. "Then let the world decide if this is crew operations or discrimination." Gasps rippled. Someone in row 4 clapped once, sharp, breaking the tension like glass. Others joined. Not applause, but protest, palms smacking armrests, phones raised higher, whispers swelling into words. "This isn't right. Check the system again." "He's not the problem. You are." The first attendant snapped, voice cracking. "Everyone remain seated. We're following FAA protocol." A man near the galley laughed bitterly. "Protocol? You tore up his boarding pass." The second attendant spun toward him, eyes sharp. "Mind your own seat, sir." But the damage was done. Silence had shattered. Marcus remained still, a center of calm in a cabin unraveling. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't plead. He just existed unmovable, undeniable, and that alone pulled people toward him. The mother in row 5 stood, her teenage son clutching her sleeve. "I've flown this airline for years," she said firmly, voice rising over the hum. "Never once have I seen a passenger treated this way. Not once. Until today." Her son added, quiet but fierce, "He paid. He belongs." Ugh. The second attendant hissed, "Sit down, both of you, or you'll be removed too." Phones caught every word, every glare, every insult that hung heavier with the weight of witnesses. And then another voice, soft, nervous, but enough to tip the scale. From the rear galley, a young trainee flight attendant stepped forward, barely more than 20. Her hands shook, but her words carried truth. "I saw it scan. His name was there. Seat 2 Ampere. It's real." Ugh. The first attendant whipped around, fury in her eyes. "Mia, step back. That's an order." But Mia didn't. Her chin lifted, voice steadier. "I won't lie. Not for this." A ripple of electricity surged through the cabin. Phones turned toward her, recording. Passengers murmured louder, leaning into the moment. Marcus turned slightly, eyes meeting hers. He didn't smile, but the faintest nod passed between them, an acknowledgement of courage. The captain's voice thundered, louder, harsher. "Enough. Security will handle this. Until then, everyone remains silent." But it was too late. Silence was no longer an option. Dozens of phones were already live, beaming truth beyond the cabin walls. And Marcus Carter sat in the middle of it all, calm, anchored, patient, because he knew storms don't need screams to break. They just need witnesses who refuse to look away. The captain's patience cracked. His voice carried through the cabin like thunder over metal wings. "This is finished. You are not first class. You're a disturbance." Every word was aimed not at Marcus's boarding pass, not at a policy violation, but at his very presence. The first attendant stepped closer, venom sharp. "People like you always think you can sneak your way into privilege." Phones caught every syllable. Gasps spilled like dropped silverware. "People like you," a passenger muttered from row 3, disbelief rising in her throat. Did she really just say that? The second attendant doubled down, arms crossed, voice raised high enough to silence the murmurs. "This isn't a charity cabin. You're a fraud, a con artist parading like you belong." The word fraud landed like shrapnel, cutting through the air, heavier than any torn ticket. Marcus didn't flinch. His breathing stayed even, his posture unbroken. The blonde woman beside him whispered, voice trembling, "He hasn't done a thing, and they're calling him a thief." The captain's jaw set, iron and arrogance. "Security will drag you out if you don't stand up." Marcus lifted his eyes slowly, meeting the captain's glare. Calm, patient. The silence between them was more violent than a shout. From the rear, Mia, the young trainee, took a step forward. "Sir, with respect, his ticket scanned valid. I saw it. I confirmed it." The captain whipped toward her, face red. "You're out of line. Stay in your lane." Mia's voice shook, but she didn't back down. "The truth isn't out of line." Passengers murmured louder. A man with a graying beard raised his phone higher. She just admitted it. His seat was valid. The second attendant snapped, panic bleeding into rage. He forged it. He hacked the system. That's stolen access. Stolen. Another word thrown like a weapon. Marcus leaned back, eyes closing for a breath. Memories surged. New York, age 32. Denied entry to a private lounge because wealth like that doesn't look like you. He had walked out silent and later bought the building that housed that lounge. Now, the same script repeated at 30,000 feet, still on the tarmac, different uniforms, same prejudice. The young man filming in row 3 raised his voice. "He's not stealing. You are stealing his dignity." Applause broke out, scattered, nervous, but real. The captain turned crimson, his authority slipping. "This is disorderly conduct. You will never fly this airline again." Marcus opened his eyes, steady as stone, his voice low, but it carried across the rows. "You've torn my ticket. You've called me a fraud. You've threatened to erase me, but you haven't asked the only question that matters." The cabin hushed. He leaned forward, eyes cutting through the crew. "Who gave you the right to decide who belongs?" Phones recorded. Passengers whispered. Mia's jaw tightened. The crew didn't answer. They couldn't, because the question wasn't for them. It was for every witness inside the cabin, and soon far beyond it. The cabin air had grown thick, charged, like a storm waiting for the strike. Then the strike came. The second attendant snatched Marcus's boarding stub from the tray table, a fragment left from the ticket she'd torn earlier. She held it up, sneered, and ripped it in two again, louder this time, making sure the sound carried down the aisle. "This is what I think of your lies," she spat, pieces falling like ash. Gasps broke out, phones tilted higher. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," as if disbelief alone could shield them. But she wasn't finished. She reached for Marcus's slim leather ID holder, snatching it before he could move. She flipped it open, waved it to the cabin like it was contraband. "Fake," she declared, her voice dripping contempt. "Stolen, maybe. People like him know how to work the system." She slammed it back on the tray, careless, like evidence tossed on a courtroom floor. The captain stepped closer, looming, voice now a roar. "You are being detained for attempted fraud. Security is already at the gate. If you resist, you'll be arrested." The words cracked across the cabin like a gavel. Marcus didn't resist. He didn't raise his voice. He sat still, anchored, his eyes fixed straight ahead. But the passengers weren't still, not anymore. From row 4, a young woman stood, her voice shaking but loud. "He hasn't done anything. You're humiliating him because of how he looks." The mother in row 5 echoed, "You can't just call him a criminal without proof." Phones buzzed. A notification pinged on someone's screen, live viewers, 1,200 and climbing. The world outside was already watching. Mia, the trainee, stepped into the aisle again. Her voice cracked but carried, "That's not protocol. That's harassment." His boarding pass was real. The first attendant whipped toward her. "You're finished. Do you understand? You'll never work another flight if you side with him." Mia's chin trembled, but she didn't step back. "Then fire me, but I won't lie." The second attendant's face twisted. "Arrest him now," she barked into her radio, eyes wild. "He's a fraud. He's a threat." That word threat landed like poison. It wasn't about documents anymore. It was about fear, about branding him dangerous because he was calm, because he was black, because he didn't bow. The passengers erupted. A man in row 2 shouted, "This is abuse." A woman in the back yelled, "He has every right to be here." The captain lifted a hand, trying to silence the storm. "Enough. He's leaving this plane in handcuffs if necessary." Marcus exhaled, slow and measured, his gaze sweeping the cabin. Witnesses, phones, truth. He let the moment hang, a silence heavier than any threat. Then his voice quiet, steady, unbreakable. "Touch me again," he said to the crew, each word deliberate, "and you'll lose more than your job." The cabin froze. Because it wasn't a plea, it wasn't even a threat. It was a promise. The radio crackled in the captain's hand. "Security is 2 minutes out," a voice reported from the jet bridge. Relief flickered across the crew's faces. They thought the cavalry was coming. Marcus finally moved. Not to stand, not to fight, just a small gesture slipping a phone from his pocket. He tapped once, placed an earpiece in, and spoke low enough to draw the cabin silent. "Rachel," he said evenly, "log this. Protocol 1. On the other end, his assistant's voice came crisp, immediate. "Understood. Recording active. Board members notified." The attendants blinked, confused. The captain frowned, suspicion creeping into his authority. "Who are you calling?" Marcus's eyes didn't leave him. "Someone who actually has authority here." Passengers leaned closer, phones steady, whispers buzzing. "What's he doing?" one murmured. "He sounds official." Rachel's voice carried into the cabin through his earpiece, loud enough for those nearest to hear. "We're live streaming incident data to compliance. Every phrase, every action, time-stamped." The blonde passenger beside Marcus whispered, barely audible, "He's not bluffing." The second attendant scoffed, trying to claw back control. "Oh, please, calling your buddy doesn't make you first class." Marcus didn't flinch. He spoke again, calm as stone. "Rachel, escalate. Protocol 2. I want staff reports pulled for this crew. Check complaint history." The cabin stirred, a ripple of gasps. This wasn't the voice of a con artist. This was the voice of someone used to commanding systems larger than a cabin. Rachel replied swiftly, "Confirmed. Preliminary review shows 7 prior complaints for discriminatory conduct tied to these employees, all marked unresolved." Phones caught it. Passengers' jaws dropped. The captain's face drained of color. The first attendant stammered, That's not relevant. He's making this up." But Marcus's calm cut deeper than her denial. "Not relevant? Then why are my systems pulling your record in real time?" The blonde passenger leaned forward, whispering into her phone for her live audience. "He just said my systems. Who is this man?" The young man filming in row 3 grinned, despite the tension. "He's flipping the script on them. Look at their faces." The captain barked, desperate now. "This is unauthorized. Shut that off." Marcus's gaze was steady, voice sharper now but never raised. "What you should shut off is your arrogance before it destroys what's left of your career." Rachel's voice returned, deliberate. "Protocol. 2 complete. Evidence archived. Complaints confirmed. Security escalation flagged to Corporate Ethics Board." Gasps again. A passenger clapped once, then twice. Soon others joined, not applause for victory yet, but solidarity, a protest in rhythm. The crew looked rattled, the authority they'd clung to slipping like sand. And Marcus? He sat exactly where he had since the beginning. Calm, anchored, patient. Because storms don't break when you scream. They break when the truth starts speaking louder than the lie. The captain's hand hovered near his radio, knuckles white, voice shaking with the weight of slipping control. "Security will remove you in seconds. That's final." Marcus tilted his head, eyes calm, steady. For the first time, a faint smile curved at the edge of his lips. "Final?" His tone was even. "Number, we're just getting started." He set his phone flat on the tray, tapped once. Rachel's voice filled the cabin, projected sharp and clear. Mr. Carter, the board has joined the line. Do you want me to patch them through? Murmurs erupted instantly. Board? Passengers leaned forward, their phones rising higher. The crew froze, caught between confusion and denial. The second attendant scoffed, brittle laugh cracking. Board? What board? He's bluffing. He's nobody. Marcus finally rose, not rushed, not loud, but deliberate. Every inch he stood pulled the cabin tighter, like gravity shifting. He faced the crew, eyes cutting through them. His voice was low but sharp enough to slice through the aisle. My name is Marcus Carter. A pause. A silence so thick even the hum of the engines seemed to fade. I'm not just a passenger. I'm not just first class. I am the founder of Carter Global, and I own 25% of this airline. The words detonated like thunder. Phones shook in hands. Gasps burst across the cabin. The blonde woman beside him covered her mouth, whispering, "Oh my God." The young man in row 3 nearly dropped his phone. No way. He owns it. He owns it. The captain's face went pale, authority dissolving into raw fear. The attendant staggered back, eyes wide, suddenly small in uniforms that no longer held weight. Mia, the trainee, whispered it first, barely audible but caught on half a dozen recordings. He's the boss. Passengers erupted, some clapping, some shouting, all voices crashing into a wave that swept the cabin. You called him a fraud? He owns you. Unbelievable. You tore up the ticket of your own boss. The first attendant's lips trembled. That can't be true. But Marcus didn't need to argue. He simply lifted his phone again. The screen glowed with the airline's board members, their faces serious, watching, listening. Rachel's voice cut through like a gavel. Confirmation. Marcus Carter is a principal shareholder of Horizon Airlines, 25% ownership stake. Everything you've done tonight is being logged in real time. The truth landed like a sentence. The captain dropped his radio. The attendants' mouths fell open. The cabin wasn't charged anymore. It was electric. Passengers rose to their feet, applause erupting, phones capturing every second. The humiliation the crew had tried to force on Marcus had flipped, doubled, and now consumed them instead. Marcus stood steady, hands at his side, voice calm, final. You called me a fraud in a cabin I own. You told me I don't belong in first class when I built it. And you thought tearing up paper would erase my name. But my name isn't on paper. He let the words hang, unshakable. My name is on this airline. The cabin thundered with cheers, and the crew, who minutes ago held all the power, were left trembling in uniforms that now felt like chains. The revelation didn't just land, it detonated. Phones kept rolling, cameras flashing in every direction, passengers buzzing like a hive just broken open. The quiet cabin of privilege had transformed into a courtroom, and the verdict was unanimous. He owns the airline, someone shouted from row 4. You humiliated your boss, came another voice, sharp with fury. The blonde woman beside Marcus leaned forward, speaking directly into her phone's camera. We just witnessed crew tear up a valid ticket of the man who owns this airline. The word spread faster than turbulence. Notifications pinged across devices, shares, reposts, views skyrocketing. The world was already watching. The first attendant's face drained of color. She staggered back a step, words tripping. I didn't know. Her partner tried to recover, voice cracking. This is all a misunderstanding, a mix-up. But no one bought it. Not anymore. Mia, the trainee, stepped into the aisle, eyes locked on her seniors. You tore up his ticket. You called him a fraud. You mocked him in front of everyone. Don't call that a misunderstanding. Applause broke out again, louder, unified. Passengers weren't just witnesses, they were allies now. The captain's authority slipped like sand through his fists. His radio buzzed with security updates, but he didn't move. His jaw clenched, eyes darting between Marcus and the cameras. He knew the truth. If they touched Marcus now, the headlines would bury them before the plane even left the ground. The young man in row 3 turned his phone toward the crew. What do you have to say for yourselves? You told him he didn't belong. You called him a thief. What do you say now? The attendants stammered, faces red, words tangled in their throats. Passengers laughed bitterly, disbelief spilling into ridicule. Speechless now, huh? Not so confident without security behind you? Guess uniforms don't make you right after all. The blonde woman spoke again, her voice steady, eyes fierce. You tried to erase a man whose name is written into the very foundation of this airline, and now the world knows. Mia nodded, lifting her chin. Truth isn't optional, not anymore. The cabin shifted completely. Power, once tightly held by the crew, had dissolved, redistributed into the hands of the witnesses and the man they tried to erase. Marcus stood steady, his calm the eye of the storm. He didn't gloat, didn't raise his voice. He simply let the chaos around him collapse on its own. The captain finally muttered, voice hollow, This isn't how it was supposed to go." Marcus's gaze swept the cabin, then landed on him, firm and final. "That's because you built your authority on arrogance, and arrogance never lasts." Passengers erupted again, cheers, claps, phones shaking with the force of history captured live. The crew, once untouchable in their pressed uniforms, now stood stripped of dignity, faces pale, trembling under the weight of their own downfall. And Marcus Carter remained exactly as he had from the beginning, calm, composed, immovable. Because storms don't destroy the anchored. They destroy the ones who thought they controlled the sky. The chaos had settled into silence, the kind that waits for judgment. Every eye in the cabin locked on Marcus, every phone trembling to capture his next word. He didn't rush, he didn't shout, he simply lifted his phone again. "Rachel," he said evenly, "initiate final action." Her reply cut the air like a blade. "Confirmed. Board authorization granted. Termination protocol engaged." A chorus of pings followed. Crew tablets on the attendant's hips lit up red, access revoked in real time. The captain's ID badge buzzed, flashing invalid. Gasps erupted as each of them realized the same truth at once. They had been fired. The first attendant's lips quivered. This can't be..." But Marcus's voice left no room for denial. "It's already done. You're no longer crew of this airline." Phones caught every second passengers cheering, clapping, shouting in disbelief. "He fired them on the spot!" someone yelled. The captain slumped back, uniform suddenly an empty costume. The attendants stood frozen, their power stripped, their arrogance dissolved. Marcus remained still, voice measured, final. "Consider this your last flight." The cabin erupted again, not in chaos this time, but in vindication. Justice had landed, and everyone felt it. The cabin thundered with applause, phones raised high like torches in a vigil. Justice had unfolded, not in a courtroom, not in a headline, but right there between leather seats and overhead bins. The crew, captain, attendants, all of them stood hollow. Their badges no longer scanned, their uniforms no longer shields. They weren't authority anymore. They were a cautionary tale, unraveling in real time before an audience of hundreds inside the plane and millions beyond it. Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He stood steady in seat 2, Ampere, the same seat they tried to strip from him, and waited for the noise to settle. When the cheers softened to silence, his voice filled the cabin, calm, certain, irreversible. "You told me I didn't belong," he said, eyes sweeping across the aisle, meeting crew, passengers, cameras alike. "You tore my ticket, mocked my name, called me a fraud, and all of it because you couldn't see past jeans and a t-shirt." A hush spread. Even the hum of the engines felt smaller. "You mistook silence for weakness, patience for submission. But silence doesn't mean powerless." He paused, letting the weight sink in. "It means anchored." The blonde passenger beside him whispered, "Anchored," as if the word itself carried gravity. Marcus's gaze landed on the captain one final time. "You thought policy was your weapon, but truth is stronger, and today it stripped you of everything you abused." "Huh." Mia, the trainee, blinked back tears. "He's right," she said, voice small but sharp, caught on half a dozen recordings. "Truth always wins." Marcus nodded once, then turned back to the cabin as a whole. His words shifted from verdict to message, from courtroom to lesson. This seat, this cabin, this airline, it isn't about appearance. It isn't about who looks the part. It's about dignity. Every passenger, every worker, every person deserves it. And if you forget that, you don't just lose your job. You lose your humanity. Silence. Heavy. Sacred. Then, applause rose again, louder this time. United. Passengers standing, clapping, phones shaking with the force of justice caught live. Marcus eased back into his seat, unshaken, unbroken, as if he had been carved into the cabin itself. He didn't need the last cheer, he didn't need the cameras. His final words carried enough weight to echo long after landing. I don't need to record justice. I am the result of it. The plane shook not from turbulence, but from thunderous applause that rolled like a wave, crashing over every row, every aisle, every witness who would never forget what they saw that day. And in that storm of vindication, Marcus Carter sat calm, anchored exactly where he belonged.